All right, we're recording this part of the podcast. It is late Thursday morning Pacific time. I needed a Massachusetts guy on. It'd been a while. I don't know. I've had a few over the years, but we got Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. Also, haven't talked football in a long time on this podcast. Haven't talked football with you on this podcast ever. And I sent you a text and I said, come up with a gimmick. I don't want to know what it is. Maybe it's a gimmick like you're buried in the NBA playoffs. Stuff's happening in the NFL that you're probably not paying attention to. I'm here to tell you what that is. What gimmick did you come up with?
That was actually exactly it, Bill.
Great. I spoiled your gimmick.
You might be buried in the NBA playoffs. And so we're going to get everybody caught up on what's happening in the NFL who hasn't been paying attention. And I got a sneaking suspicion a couple of these you probably paid some attention to, but I actually had trouble narrowing it down to 5, but I think I have 5 we can work with.
You could do an honorable mention at the end if there's a couple.
I have a couple honorable mentions. Like my honorable mentions, we can do that start. Like Jim Irsay's passing. I think we should give some mention to that. And then Trey Hendrickson's contract situation. I didn't know if that was interesting enough, but that's still ongoing.
We'll save those for the end. Come at it with a bang first, and then we'll save the honorable mention for late.
The other thing is, like, over the last 48 hours, I did learn what pink cocaine is. So I got that too.
So this has been on a few of my Pats fan text threads. Yeah. I also did not know what pink cocaine is, but I'm old. Stephon Diggs already in what is it, a yacht scandal? Is it an imbroglio? What is it?
I mean, I don't know if it would. I mean, it's not like it's up there with like the Love Boat. In Minnesota 20 years ago, that I think is still a gold standard. I'd probably still put this behind like the SS Beckham in 2016, right before the playoffs. But maybe it might be number 3 in my time covering the NFL as far as boat scandals go.
Yeah, Vrabel, Pat's coach Mike Vrabel, the new most important coach of my life, he was just basically like, we're not talking about this, and yada-yada'd it a little bit, and we'll see if the story dies. All right. So let's go top 5 biggest things first, and then we'll do honorable mentions. So the biggest thing that has happened during the NBA playoffs, NFL related, that you think I should care about because I haven't been paying attention is what?
The Steelers didn't sign a quarterback.
What are they doing?
They are pretty confident that their quarterback's going to be Aaron Rodgers. And I do think that there's I think there's actually some decent reason here for people who want to listen to it. And I think this goes back to like how you manage everything in the spring and trying to get their work done. And I think the logic for both sides here was, if he signs April 1st, and look, he's got personal stuff he's dealing with, he's traveling. And if he signs April 1st and says, okay, guys, like, I'm going to go away for the next 2 months. And when I'm back, but like, I got some personal stuff I got to attend to. I've got travel planned. What you're inviting then is whenever you start the off-season program, you get into OTAs. Anytime the media is there, it's going to be, where's Aaron? Where's Aaron? Where's Aaron? And so I think both sides wanted to avoid that. And so that's part of it. And then I think the other end of it, and this is like, to me, almost the more interesting thing, I think Aaron was really affected by the way his trip to Egypt was covered last year. And so going through all of that,
Can we go backwards? How was it covered? I don't even remember.
Well, if you remember, so he skipped the mini camp. The Jets had their mini camp at the end of June, or in the middle of June last year, at the end of their off-season program. And Aaron had been like pretty much a full participant in everything that they'd done up until then. And then he skipped the mini camp, and it was something that they had kind of predetermined he was going to do. But, Saleh said to him, okay, like, that's fine, but I still have to fine you, and I still have to hold you responsible. And I still have to say, like, this isn't an excused absence, because we have to have a standard for everybody. And it became like a 2 or 3 week story. And when they hit bumps in the summer and early in the fall, it continued to be a story. And I like, the sense I get is that Aaron was frustrated by that, and he didn't want to go through that again. So I think part of the logic here for the Steelers, for Aaron, is just whenever you're in, you're all in, but not until then. And so I think the logic here between the Steelers and Aaron is like, okay, like once you show up, like we need all of you, bud. We need you all the way here. And so Aaron's taking care of everything he needs to take care of now. And when he shows up, I do think he'll be all in. And again, I think a huge part of this is marked by what happened with the Jets last year.
Can I recap your seemingly logical explanation?
Yeah.
So Aaron Rodgers was upset that when he left the team to go to Egypt during a time when all of his teammates were actually around and accountable to play for the Jets, that people covered that like it was a news story because he was the quarterback of the most famous person in the team, and he didn't like how that played out.
Because it was a news story?
Yeah. So he didn't like that a news story was a news story. Yeah. And now he is doing this, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but then he's also showing up on Pat McAfee, just opining on stuff and kind of doing whatever he wants. Like, if I'm on the Steelers and I thought this guy, I thought Rodgers didn't want to get hit anymore last year. I don't know how you felt. Did you feel like he wanted to get hit anymore? Because I didn't.
So I think that there's an element of that, but I think if you go back and you watch, you see pieces of it. Like I'm telling you, just pull up like a 10-minute highlight of their game against the Jaguars, which nobody watched because it was the Jets and the Jaguars at the end of the season. But if you pull up like a 10-minute YouTube highlight of that game at the end of December, you'll see it's like all still there. You'll be like, wow, like that looks like Aaron Rodgers in 2011, Well,
I mean, I didn't realize he was able to pull that off against the tanking Jaguars.
Yeah, but it does look good. I'm just telling you, like I understand, but like there was like some high level shit in that game, and that he and Devontae Adams, it's really it's all there, So, I think what's maybe most interesting about this whole thing to me is where the Steelers are, and that they are so leveraged for right now. TJ Watt wants a new contract. He's turning 31. Minkah Fitzpatrick's turning 29. I mean, Cam Hayward isn't on the back nine. He's, basically walking to the clubhouse now. Like this is probably his last shot. They trade for DK Metcalf, who's a third contract guy and has had some injury issues. Like it's really, this is a team, like if this group's going to win, it sort of has to be right now. And so, I think a big part of, the Steelers' logic, and I felt like all along, like they were going to be a contender for whatever big name quarterback became available. Is Kirk Cousins a swing for the fences?
I've been waiting on that one, by the way.
Yeah. And like, to me, like that's the thing with Kirk. It's like Kirk is like more, you may be more likely to hit a double with Kirk and less likely to hit a home run, if that makes sense. Where with Aaron, maybe you're more likely to strike out, but at least you're swinging for the fences when you've been really average at that position since Ben Roethlisberger retired.
So you're basically only in the torn Achilles recovery old quarterback business at this point. If you're the
what
Steelers,
else is available though? If it wasn't going to be Stafford, right? Like, and I think Stafford was the most logical answer for a lot of different teams, and the Raiders and Giants were really in that one. The Steelers dipped their toe in it. There just aren't that many options, so it was a bad year to be looking at quarterback in the draft, especially, if you didn't have the first overall pick. And the veteran options, again, like there were a lot of, the Rams, when the Rams made the offer they did to Stafford, back in March, it was with it in the back of their head. This guy doesn't want to leave Los Angeles, and this guy doesn't want to play for anybody but Sean McVay.
The feeling.
And the Giants had the same like sort of thing in the backs of their head as they were pursuing him. Raiders too. It was like, we're really going after this, but this guy's going to wind up back in LA. So, if you take Stafford off the table, then it really is, it's Cousins, it's Rodgers. And then, now after that, you're talking about getting into like Joe Flacco territory. There just wasn't a lot out there.
So just all probably washed up guys. So the Steelers died in the last month of the season. And one of the reasons they died is TJ Watt died as the season went along. And the last, 40% of his season, he just didn't seem disruptive anymore. And I know they, maybe under the radar blaming the Russell Wilson thing got weird. Team wasn't that good to begin with. The schedule got really unfavorable for them down the stretch, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I'm looking at FanDuel and they are over 8.5 wins
Yeah.
which with in the Tomlin era, for me, is just a blind. I don't even have to look at that,
Just
checking
go.
it. That's plus 125 on FanDuel because all the action has been on the under, which is now minus 145. I don't.
How much that's just because Mason Rudolph's the quarterback right now?
But could it also be what happened to them in the last month of last season, and the fact that you can point to a couple AFC teams and go, well, that team's the Pats are going to be better. The Jets are going to be better. They're in the same thing with the Ravens. The Bengals, they might fix their defense. We'll see with Hendrickson.
Yeah.
The Browns might actually have a little more stability at quarterback. AFC South is going to be better except for Houston. You go on through and it's like, maybe this is going to run out this year. I'm just starting my homework and they make me nervous.
So like, I would say like their offensive line should be a lot better. Like, and we've actually drafted okay. If Troy Fautanu, works out for them at tackle, they've got Broderick Jones. That's 2 first-round picks at tackle. They should be as strong. Zach Frazier might be the best young center in football. Like they have a chance to have the best offensive line they've had in over a decade. And then if DK Metcalf comes through, and I know I'm talking a lot of ifs here, right? Like if DK Metcalf comes through, if TJ Watt is himself again, if Minkah Fitzpatrick,
if Aaron Rodgers is still alive.
Right. So like there's all of these ifs, but if you're them, like what's your other choice? You know what I mean? It was either this, like take this big swing at quarterback and try to get it right and try to squeeze a championship run out of this core that you've had together for the last few years, or blow it up. And like that's why I look at this as like it's the one team where you look at it and I was like, that's a team that like that's a really worthy swing, because now at least like you're taking that swing with TJ Watt and Fitzpatrick and like some really great players that they've had there for a long time. I don't mind this swing if I'm the Steelers. And look, like I think people there would tell you that the Russell Wilson thing undermined so many things in the last month of the season, and that a lot of that building really wanted them to go back to Justin Fields. And it was something where, I mean, Tomlin was kind of, again, all on his own on that one. And I think it's part of the reason why Tomlin likes Shedeur, like he likes Shedeur going into the draft. But I don't think Tomlin wanted to, I don't think he wanted to like press that button again at quarterback after what happened with Russell at the end of the year last year. So there's some dynamics there where it's like, I mean, there's some stuff that happened at the end of the year in games where it's just like, man, like if we were just like average at that position, or we were just running things as they were supposed to be run, we might have been okay. And like, so I think their thought is, if we can get like 85% of what Aaron Rodgers was 3 years ago, like we might have a Super Bowl team, which you can argue whether they would or not. But I think if you're them and you're looking at it with this group of players that you've had for the last few years, and this might be your last shot before you really like go through like a real reset, then it's worth taking that swing.
Well, philosophically, they just feel like they're one of the teams that have decided it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money at quarterback unless the guy's awesome.
Yeah.
And we can patch this together, put together the rest of the team around and try to get to 10, 11 wins every year and then hope we can cross our fingers. Here's the issue for them. I mean, if I asked you on FanDuel right now, who had better odds to make the playoffs, the Patriots or the Steelers, who would you say?
Well, because you're asking me, I know it's the Patriots.
Yeah, I probably could have framed that better. I should be better at this after 19 years. Yeah, the Patriots are plus 158 and the Steelers are plus 164. Now, that's a lot of that has to do with this
schedule.
This schedule the Patriots have it's comical.
Yeah.
Like you're like, is this real? Where are they? Oh, there's Buffalo. Okay, you go through it and it's like they're favored apparently
in 11
13,
games, I think it is.
I think it's 13 of the 17 right now or 12, something like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see with Pittsburgh. All right, what's your number 2 thing?
So my number 2 thing, the Cowboys, a year after Jerry Jones famously used the phrase all in, actually pulled an all in move and traded for George Pickens. And this one is really interesting to me because they're another team where like all the things you said about the Steelers, I think sort of apply to the Cowboys, right? Like, is this group that they have right now going to be good enough? And like, is there something that you can do to try to put that group over the top? And so I think the answer was, like, we got to get Dak Prescott some more help. And so that when they went into the draft, they looked at it like, we either want to come out of this with a lineman or a receiver. And I think if Tetairoa McMillan, who went 8th to the Panthers, made it to 12, like maybe that would have been a consideration. But they were sort of looking at it as this mosaic. It's like, well, we still have, I think there were a handful of receivers they were considering in trade, veteran receivers that they had studied and they had talked to teams about. And so McMillan's gone. They like Tyler Booker. They just lost Zach Martin. They draft Tyler Booker. And then on the back end, they go and make the deal for George Pickens, which, here's the most interesting thing about it to me.
I'm cracking my neck as we get ready for this discussion.
So this one. So one of the main reasons the Steelers got rid of George Pickens is because the issues with him a lot of times have come down to his role in the offense, the direction of the offense, and how much he's getting the ball, which is normal with a lot of receivers. He's very over the top with it, which makes him worse than most with it when it comes to that stuff. And so when they traded for DK Metcalf, the thing was, it was like he plays the same position, not that they're just receivers, the same receiver spot.
Running a straight line down the sideline position.
The X-receiver position, right? So they're both X-receivers. Okay, so now you got to figure out a way to play them together. And now George Pickens is in a contract year. So do you think if he goes through a 2 or a 3 or a 4 week stretch in the middle of October with, say, 3 catches, and is he going to be okay with that just because we got another receiver? Is he
also,
gonna be
as we discussed earlier, the quarterback situation might not be to George's liking.
Right. So
to say the least.
So is he going to be okay? Is he going to be okay with, if he wasn't okay with it before, now in a contract year with $100 million on the line, is he suddenly going to be okay with, no, that's fine, I'm okay. DK Metcalf's on the team now. Okay, so like that's part of the logic for the Steelers and moving off of him and saying we're going to be better off with Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson and whoever else.
Well, can I interject one thing here?
Now, here's the thing.
When he started the Thursday night, that last play of the game against the Browns, when instead of trying to go for the Hail Mary, he just chose to get in a fight with the D-back that he'd been waiting to get in a fight with for an hour. That to me is like, it's the beginning of the end, at least with George in Pittsburgh. That was such a weird play.
So there's that, but like, and there's the lack of effort in blocking sometimes, all of that, right? Like, so like that all exists. Okay, so if that whole thing was going to be a problem in a contract year in Pittsburgh, who's one of the highest volume receivers in football as far as targets go?
Well, CeeDee Lamb.
Right. So like, is this now going to be okay with him? Again, he's in a new place. He's with new offensive coaches who are in their first year truly running the offense because Mike McCarthy's gone now. And he's not getting the ball with all that money on the line. Is he suddenly going to be okay with that? Like,
so you don't think they're going to take care of him as part of this deal? Because that was my assumption.
Not right now. They're not. I mean, they're going to see how it goes. And like I said, like everything's going to be in May and June. Like it's really easy for everybody to have their arms around each other and say, this is all going to work out in May and June. It's a little different to project these things in September and October. They still have the Micah Parsons thing floating around out there too. And I know like one thing that they had sort of discussed with George and his people was, are you comfortable going into the year without a new contract? And the answer was yes. So like, if they go into the year with, so like, but you can look at that both ways, right? Like, are you going to get a super motivated guy who's going to be out to prove to everybody he's team first? Maybe. I think the people in Pittsburgh would tell you what might be more likely is if he's not getting the ball a month or two into the season, you could have a problem. So that's sort of like
we also have a 30-year, maybe even longer sample size with receivers like this who aren't getting paid or aren't getting the contracts they want, then aren't getting the ball enough, and kind of how that's going to go. To me, like from afar, it's just like a typical Jerry Jones move, but it's another shiny new toy. It's like when the bark box comes for my dog every month, and it's like, hey, it's a newspaper that's a squeaky toy, and my dog will be excited about it for 20 minutes and then moves on to the next thing. That's how he's been in free agency almost every year. I thought running back to me was a way more important. The running backs murdered them last year. They addressed that too. The offensive line isn't close to where it used to be.
Yeah.
And I don't see any scenario where they're one of the top 2 teams in the NFC East. So you're just going into a season knowing you're number 3, and maybe even worse if the Giants are a little bit better right away than people think. So I do not feel good if I'm Dallas.
Yeah, and that division, by the way, you've seen the schedule for that division. They're playing the NFC North and the AFC West. So
brutal. It's the worst one of all the schedules.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be really interesting. And I think a lot of it for them is counting on Brian Schottenheimer as a culture builder, that he'll be able to build the right environment. But
that'll go great.
I always go back, to like, I don't like the idea of like the receiver that the Steelers, that Mike Tomlin is ready to get rid of. Like, the history of that's not great, like
True.
when Mike Tomlin, I mean, back in 2015, 2016, like, did anybody think of like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell as bad guys? It wasn't until they were gone, really,
or disruptive in some way.
They got disruptive at the end. Like, Bell got disruptive at the end, but it's like generally when the Steelers are ready to walk away from a guy for those sorts of reasons, or a guy who has that sort of background, generally it doesn't work out for the next team that gets them.
Dallas is, you could get and their over-under's 8.5. Playoffs not looking great. I'm down on them. What's your third thing?
Derek Carr retired, which I feel like this, maybe because it happened on a Saturday, kind of like flew under the radar. You know what I mean? Like, but it's one of a number of quarterback situations. I kind of grouped this together. This is cheating a little bit by me, but the Saints, the Vikings, the Browns, it feels like a few teams where the quarterback situations are going to be really interesting. And
or macabre. What's the or grizzly? I don't know what the right adjective is, but there's going to be some tough ones.
I mean, I throw the Vikings. I'm hesitant to throw the Vikings in there.
Don't be hesitant. We don't know if JJ McCarthy coming off a torn ACL is going to be good. Who knows?
And the reason I throw them in there with the other two is because the expectations are so high there. Like, if you're a player on that team, that's a 14-win team last year. Like, that's not the type of team that like can throw the year overboard in the name of quarterback development. So, what does that look like? And, I know like JJ fought through a lot last year. He lost a lot of weight, and he had a lot of ups and downs, like coming back from that injury. And, obviously had the second follow-up surgery, was more of a cleanup. He's in a much better place right now. And I don't think there's a better place in the league for a young quarterback to be, especially because of what they did with their offensive line and signing Ryan Kelly and Will Fries and drafting Donovan Jackson and, getting Christian Darrisaw back obviously will help a lot. But the Vikings are the one where I look at it and it's like so much is going to hinge. I mean, that could be a Super Bowl team if JJ McCarthy has a great year. Or the quarterback position could really hold them back.
Well, plus, especially you had Cousins for a few years there, who, regardless of how you feel about him, was still a significantly above average quarterback.
Yeah.
Then you get Darnold for 4 months last year, who was excellent. Mm-hmm. And now you have a new guy who God only knows coming off ACL.
Yeah. So like, I look at those three teams, the Saints to me, I mean, like Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler. I mean, Jake Hayner's hurt now.
Well, can you explain the salary cap piece of it? Because wasn't it, in a weird way, a great thing that Derek Carr retired? Because I think the Saints were going to suck either way. So doesn't that help them?
It was one of the more bizarre endings to a career I've seen in 20 years covering this. I mean, it started with, if you go back to the end of the season, I think like Kellen Moore committed, but didn't really commit to Carr as the starter in the introductory press conference. Then there were some whispers that Carr wanted a trade, and some teams sniffed around that.
They sniffed around and it smelled like sewage. They were like, oh.
And then there was, well, Carr wants a raise because to affirm like, this is my team. Then
we gotta confirm that. He was so good the last 2 years. Let's give him the car keys.
Then after that, they convert his contract, which basically means he's on the team without really consulting with them, which they can do. It's a contract mechanism, but it basically locked them in. Where it converted, it took like basically 98% of his salary and turned it into a signing bonus.
So they F themselves for this season with how they did that. because they didn't think the season was going to go well anyway.
They had that, and that restructures that restructure pushes the cap money forward, but it basically locks them in with the team. Now, where they are saved by this is that they don't have to spend that money now. Now they sunk a $10 million roster bonus into him, and part of the separation agreement is he gets to keep the $10 million roster bonus. But
so it's a buyout.
Yeah, for the most part. And now they move on, and we'll see. I mean, Tyler Shuck was in college for 7 years. He was at 4 different schools. I've heard he has, I think it's 4 degrees, which is pretty wild. But like he was Justin Herbert's backup for 2 years at Oregon, which gives you an idea how old he is. And then you have him competing with Spencer Rattler, and you see where that goes, and that looks like is this a full reset year for them, where they're in the mix for one of the quarterbacks next year? Obviously there's a quarterback who could be in the draft. I don't think he will be in the draft, but a quarterback who could be in the draft next year with a very famous last name that has ties to that organization.
Wouldn't you say that's the number one I could see them tanking once we get to November NFL team that we have? I can't even think of another one that would be a bigger suspect.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd have to think about that one. I mean, I don't know how many teams there are that are like just outright in that position, need a quarterback, might wind up being in that position where they're not very good. And you never know, like the way these things are gonna play out. And Kellen Moore is a first-year coach, obviously can't afford for them. It's hard for him to.
They're the number one because like even if you look at a team like Tennessee, they just got their quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like they'd be like, oh, I hope we suck. Carolina has a quarterback. Chicago has a quarterback. Cleveland would be the only other one, right?
Vegas should be competitive. I think more competitive with Geno as a quarterback. So yeah, I mean, Cleveland would be the other one if that thing crashes and burns.
Even though they just took 2. And the only other one I can think of is the Colts.
Yeah.
It's probably an AFC South team that will have the number 1 pick next year. Would be my guess. The Colts have
the Colts are interesting because that could be. I mean, obviously with new people, with a new owner, a new principal owner in charge. Yeah. And then like the GM has been there now Chris Ballard's been there this will be his 9th year there. And they really haven't accomplished a ton. If he's in trouble, then maybe the coach is in trouble. It could, if things get off to a bad start there, it could get messy in a hurry.
He's good at telling everybody how well he's doing though, Chris Ballard. It's going great. He seems like a lot of people love him. And every year it's like a victory lap about how good their draft or free agency was. And then,
Yeah. It's hard because it really, while Luck was still a quarterback, it looked like it was really going in a great direction. And then, you have the surprise retirement 2 years
7 years ago
there. And that's the thing is like, it had been a crutch for a while and it can't be a crutch anymore. Yeah. It's been way too long.
No, you look at that division. Because I think I really liked Houston last year.
So Houston's my team.
They make me really nervous, right?
Not enough people are talking about how I think Houston could bounce back in a really big way.
Oh, make the case.
So I think Houston's got a top 5 defense. And I think with the level of like the young core players like Will Anderson and Derek Stingley, and they bring Danielle Hunter back, and they've got like a lot of nice ancillary pieces on defense too.
Really good coach.
They've got the defense. Yeah, they've got the defense where they want it. And part of the reason they traded Laramie Tunsil was because they felt like the culture in their offensive line room was broken, and that they weren't able to kind of match like the culture they built on defense on offense.
Interesting.
And so they trade Laramie Tunsil. They bring in 1 million different tackles to try and fix it. They draft the kid from Minnesota. They bring in Trent Brown and Cam Robinson. They just throw a bunch of darts at tackle. They bring in a new offensive coordinator from the Rams and Nick Caley. And
they take 2 wide receivers from the same college.
Right, who I think have a chance to be really, like, if you look at the history from that school, like a lot of guys from that school come in and produce right away. Yeah. So it wouldn't shock me, like as like complementary pieces to Nico Collins, if those guys are playing pretty well right away. And you have CJ Stroud. I look at it and I'm like, a lot of people have totally forgotten about them. I think they have an elite defense. And if your problem is offense and you've got CJ Stroud to build around and you're bringing in a coordinator from the Rams,
Yeah.
who I think is really capable and has both like the Josh McDaniels and Sean McVay background, and you play in a weak division, and like as much as people thought they were not the same last year, they were down by 1 point going into the fourth quarter of the divisional round at Arrowhead.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
That Chiefs game is the best case for that they're actually going to be good this year, and they're a little closer than people think. The other case would be the division.
Right. So like it's, I think we look at it like it was broken because our expectations were so high after CJ's rookie year, D'Amico's first year. And I just don't know that teams are looking at that. Like, I don't know if people are looking at that team enough and saying, you know what, like there's still a lot of like really good stuff in place here. And if the young quarterback bounces back where CJ was doing incredibly high level shit in 2023, like that could be a dangerous team. Now, do they break into the Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City? Do they break into to that tier? Cincinnati could get back into that tier. Like maybe not. But I think they're like, if you look at like the teams in the AFC, like they may have the best chance to do it of the teams that are right below that.
So the division odds, do you know what their odds are for that division?
Houston's got to be an overwhelming favorite, right?
So that's what I thought too. Went to FanDuel. They're plus 115 to win the AFC South. I don't know who else you would bet in the AFC South unless you wanted to really talk yourself into Jacksonville.
I was going to say, is there like a lot of belief in James Gladstone and Liam Cohen now? I don't know.
Or is there belief that trade might be like, wow, Travis Hunter's like pretty good, but holy shit, they gave up a lot for that guy. Yeah. He's not jumping out of my TV.
I can't wait to watch him, but
Me neither.
I think Jacksonville's problem, like under the last regime, and this is where I think like there's some cleaning up that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Is like they paid a lot of good players great money. Like there are guys in that roster that they paid like their franchise players when they're just pretty good. And
would you put Trevor Lawrence on that list? Because I would.
I mean, you could. I think they pay Walker Little to play left tackle after he played for like 15 minutes for them, right?
Yeah.
Tyson Campbell at corner. I mean, Christian Kirk is gone, but I think he'd be another example of that.
Right.
Like there was just a lot of examples of like, I mean, you could even like argue that Walker is one of those guys. You know what I mean? Like, so like, do they just have like a collection of pretty good players, and they don't have like they don't have like Houston has Will Anderson, like I said, Anderson, Derek Stingley, Nico Collins, CJ Stroud. I mean,
they have an identity at least.
Right. Like how many players on Houston's roster, like if you rank the two rosters, Houston and Jacksonville, how many Texans would you have to go through to get to the first Jaguar?
Oof.
You know?
Good point. All right. Well, I sidetracked you. You have two more on your list.
Yep. So number 4, Caleb Williams is in the news again. And this is an excerpt from, I think, our mutual friend Seth Wickersham's book. And it was, for those who missed it, before the 2024 draft, he and his dad had looked at the idea of forcing their way out. I guess what you would call it is pulling an Eli, and had their eyes on the Vikings. And the Vikings had actually researched Caleb too. That was of course the draft they took JJ McCarthy in. So like this has become like a little bit of like a firestorm in Chicago. And I think it's sort of, the first signal of like what's to come for Caleb there. And I think he is such a high-end talent. Like
when you say what's to come, you mean venom and disappointment? And
just the level of like the training wheels are off now. The excuses are gone.
Oh, from a scrutiny standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Like now it's like you have to start playing well.
Yeah.
We've seen the year 2 jump. I mean, this might get you excited about Drake too, but we've seen the year 2 jump
I can't get more excited.
I mean, but you look at it like Patrick Mahomes, MVP of the league, his second year. Lamar Jackson, MVP of the league, his second year. Joe Burrow's in the Super Bowl in his second year. Josh Allen, 10 wins and in the playoffs in his second year.
Drake May is going to be in his second year.
And so like you look at all of this, right? Like, and so like, is Caleb going to take that step? And I think this is this is the scrutiny that Caleb's going to be under because they fixed so many things. They drafted Colston Loveland, 10th overall, Luther Burden with their second pick. They traded for Joe Tooney and Jonah Jackson to play guard. They signed Drew Dahlman from Atlanta to play center. They hired Ben Johnson, which is a huge part of it.
Yeah, they've removed every excuse he had: coaching,
Right.
offensive line, weapons, whatever. He has everything now.
He has, and you look at it, and it's like this now looks like they should be able to get a very clean read on what Caleb can be. Yeah. And it was interesting because I did a little reporting on this last week where, I kind of like asked around like, what they've been working on with Caleb, and the stuff that they've been working on was really how you carry yourself as a franchise quarterback and how you have to, like, the command that you have to be a franchise quarterback. And, a couple of the examples that were brought up to me, they watched tape of him taking sacks and how long it took for him to come off the ground. And basically the point they were trying to make to him was, last year was a tough year. We understand your offensive coordinator gets fired, then your head coach gets fired. Your offensive line wasn't very good. We get it. It's like, but if you're lying on the ground, for an extended period of time, you're not picking yourself up off the ground, that's going to resonate with the rest of the team. That's the sort of thing that's going to, and so it's like, you need to be popping up off the ground after hits.
Did they show them Drake May tapes of him popping off the ground during his 120 sacks?
Probably could be a good example. Yeah. Another thing they said, like they showed tape like early in a game of him, and the motion's coming from the right and he's looking to the left. And so like there's little things as far as like command, like we want you to be the commander of the offense. And so like so much of what they're doing right now is we're trying to make you the guy, and we're going to give you every tool to make you the guy, and we're going to tell you how you have to carry yourself as the guy. And so, I think
you know what though,
this is going to take a big jump.
This is why we spend so much time talking about this position, because what works and doesn't work is so complicated and has so many different factors in it. And all the stuff you're talking about is what I believe in the quarterback position. It's not just about your arm strength. Can you move around? Like you're a leader of men. You have to be the most charismatic guy in the team. You have to make those guys believe in you for 12 months a year. And the guys that fail are always the guys that fail that test.
I remember Brady saying, I remember talking to Brady about this way back when I was covering the Patriots.
By the way, Brady put the most thought into this out of anybody, but go ahead.
And he said to me, the only way I can show my toughness is availability. That's the only way I can, at that position, the only way I can, in this game where everyone's tough, it's like the only way I can prove my toughness to the guys who are really out there in the trenches is to be available and to be the first one into the huddle and to be the first one up and to be available to them. And I think that was sort of the point with like, you have to be the first one to pick yourself up off the ground too, because no matter how hard you got hit, someone's probably hurting worse than you are out there on that field. And like, even like the thing about the motion, right? Like, is it going to be like that guy who's coming, that receiver who's coming in motion, right, from your right, and you're looking left? Is that guy going to follow you after that happens? You know what I mean? Like, or is he going to see that and say, what is this kid doing? So it's little stuff like that I think they're trying to do to empower Caleb. And
that's really interesting.
Yeah. And so I think like it's just, I think that stuff is really, they're trying to kind of empower him to be the leader there. And I even think like the way he handled the backlash of the Seth thing. I think it was yesterday. He stood up there and he stood in front of the media and said, like, look, like he took the bullet for it. He said, look, like when I was coming out, me and my dad were looking at everything. My dad, as any parent would, was like we were just investigating all of our avenues. Once we came and visited the Bears and we got to know the organization, we felt differently about it. But of course, we looked at the history of it. And it was, to me, it was like he could have hid from that. You know what I mean? Like he could have just said, I'm not talking about it. It's in the past. But the only way to kill that story is to stand up there and answer the question. So I thought that was a pretty good sign for maybe him maturing a little bit and growing into the leadership role for, one of the most, that market for football, like that's one of the more pressure packed markets in the league.
Yeah, certainly among the hungriest. Yeah, if the story's true, admit it's true, and then nobody's going to talk about it anymore. It's funny, though, that a lot of the stuff heading toward that draft, when people were trying to say what they were concerned about with them and nobody could fully articulate it, and then the way this story blew up over the last month, it's like, it's kind of what we're talking about. We know you have the talent. There's more to that position than just talent. Are you going to figure out that part? And that's it. Even Anthony Edwards was taking shit during this OKC series about people didn't like how he handled the Game 5 loss. They didn't like that he disappeared a little bit in Game 4. And it's like, there's just a different spotlight of how you're getting picked apart when you become the guy. And that's part of how it goes. It's funny you mentioned the getting yourself up fast thing, because there's a social media video of all the hits Brady took, especially early in his career, which were, there's one, I think it's the Colts. He's scrambling on the right sideline and just doesn't see somebody. And he just gets like annihilated, like it's a video game. And he gets right up like that. But he was always passionate about that, which was what was so scary about the ACL injury. Remember? Because he didn't get up that time. It's like, oh, this is bad. He's not getting up.
Sometimes you pick up things on these things, covering them in really stupid ways. And this is one example for me. So, when I was covering the Patriots, when I was on the beat, my roommate's one of my best friends from college, and he was coaching. He was a limited earnings coach at Northeastern before they dropped football. And we were living in the North End. And so like he and I would talk about all these things. And I remember him, like, it was awesome. Like, when I watch football with him, like he would actually come and watch with me when I would like watch the Patriots games over again. And he said, you know what the difference with Brady is? And I'm like, no, what would you say it is? It's that he lets the plays develop. It's like, if you watch other quarterbacks, they get rid of the ball. He is so willing to take the hit. And this was before the ACL, right? But he is legitimately, like, watching him, he was saying to me, he is legitimately giving the receivers an extra second to get open. He is giving everything an extra second to develop because he's willing to take a hit that the other quarterback won't. And I thought that was such an interesting piece of insight, and I think it matches up with what you're trying to say on Brady. And I think the guys recognize that too. You know what I mean? Like the receivers recognize that too. The guys because that's going to help them out.
That was the amazing thing about Drake May last year.
Yeah.
He was always willing to hold the ball for an extra second, to the point where we're like, dude, we're going to go 3-14. Like, maybe just get rid of the ball. But he didn't want to. And I think that speaks to what you were talking about.
The concussion at the end of the year. Where he made a bounce,
Yeah, but also like Rodgers last year, I didn't feel like he wanted to keep the ball. I thought he wanted to get rid of it. I don't think he wanted to take hits last year. What's your fifth thing?
So I had like tush push here, but I'm so freaking sick of talking about that.
Yeah, please.
Like, I'm done with it.
I will say I did love the Eagles owner getting all aggro about it. I like when those guys get aggro in those meetings, and he really seemed like he was like challenging the manhood of all the other owners, which was like hilarious how he approached it.
Yeah. I think like calling the other owners a teenager was an interesting strategy to take. I actually think the bigger thing to come out of that meeting is the discussion on the playoff format changing. And
let's fucking go. I was hoping you'd bring this up.
So like, I don't think enough people are talking about this. When they first brought it up in the meeting in March, they had probably 5 or 6 votes. So for people who don't know, you need 24.
Well, you got to explain what the big tweak they wanted to do.
So was. So you still get in the playoffs automatically if you win your division, but they want opens. But the Lions proposed open seating. More or less, it would mean everything. Like, you're seated purely by record.
But the genesis of this, explain the Vikings Week 18 thing, because that's where this really starts.
So. It's the Vikings. The Vikings in Week 18 were in a war with the Lions. They lose. They're 14 wins, and now they got to go on.
It's the most violent game of the year, basically.
Right, and they got to go on the road in the wild card round and play a Rams team that rested everybody in Week 18,
and lost what 4 more games than the Vikings.
And I think they had 10. I think they had 10 wins. They were 10-7. Yeah, so they were 4 games worse. But I think the nuance to this is that people think this is about fairness for the league, and it's not. It's about games in Week 17 and Week 18 being compelling. And the Rams are actually the example of why the Rams are what the Rams did scares the league, because the Rams didn't have nothing to play for in Week 18. If you remember, they could have played to avoid the Vikings. Like, they could have been the 3rd seed or the 4th seed. Sean McVay makes the conscious decision. It's more important that my guys get the rest than play for the 3rd seed. So I'm going to sit everybody down. They lose to the Seahawks.
I was on this podcast saying I couldn't believe they were playing this way. How would you want to have, like, this is nuts. You're going to end up playing the Vikings or the Lions? That's crazy. Why would you want to do that?
So that scares the league because it paid off. And because now you have a team, and the NFL, they're very cognizant of what's happened in the NBA. and they look at each of the 272 games as pieces of real estate that they can sell. So are we making those pieces of real estate as valuable as we possibly can? If you have the format they have now, I think is fair in a lot of ways because of the scheduling formula and the way that works. But you have these games at the end of the season now, like where it's like, screw it, like we'd rather get the rest.
Well, but how does the 18 game season tie into this?
And that's what I was going to say is like so they're projecting it forward and they're saying this is going to get worse.
Right.
Like it just worked for the Rams and this now is going to get worse if we don't do something about it. And so if they have open seating, like there will be more to play for at the end of the year. The problem is the scheduling formula. In the NFL, you only play 14 teams over the course of a year. Of course, you play your 3 teams in your division twice, and you only play teams in your conference. You only play 11 teams in your conference. So the schedules are so wildly different. And I use the example of like the NFC East, right? Like, so the NFC East plays the NFC North and the AFC West this year. The NFC West plays the 2 South divisions. So, I mean, you could argue an 11-win season by the Eagles is more impressive this year than a 13-win season by the Niners, right?
Yeah, no question.
The Niners have played 8 games against those 2 South divisions. So
it's the reason the Niners over-under is like 3 wins higher than it seems like it should have been because their schedule is ridiculous.
It's a joke, yeah. And so, like, you had the Rams COO, Kevin Demoff, stood up in this meeting, last week and basically said to the room, guys, we need to decide what we're trying to do here. Are we trying to be fair or are we trying to make the games at the end of the season more compelling? And that led to like more big picture talk where I think the scheduling formula is going to come under some scrutiny. Are we doing this right? And I think the scheduling formula, I think, is mostly fine.
Yeah.
But like, that's the sort of big picture things that they're going to be looking at. I mean, was it possible that it would be fair to have just have open conference and no divisions, right? Just
I do not like that.
And like, but here will be the idea. You play every team in your conference. So you have 15 games in conference. And then if you're going to an 18-game schedule, you play 3 games out of conference every year. I'm not wild.
So you would you do 2 divisions instead of 3. You play everybody in your division twice. That's 14 games.
No.
Oh, no.
You deconstruct the divisions altogether.
So you have a 16-team division. You'd play 15. I don't know about that.
I mean, it's one solution, but the point is, like, I don't think they're going to do that. But the point is, like, I think this is the sort of big picture thinking that's coming out of it. Like I saw, on the way out of the meetings, a team president say to somebody else, hey, I want to be part of the scheduling discussion. It's going to be a big picture topic for them over the next couple of years. And I think it's going to have way more of an impact than what everybody was focusing on last week with the Eagles.
Right.
Because it could, they could lead to some structural change in the way that all this stuff works. So think
about this. Last year, Tampa was 10-7. They're the 3 seed. The Rams were 10-7. They're the 4 seed. The Vikings were 14-3, 5 seed, and Washington's 12-5, 6 seed. So, if it's within 2 wins, I get it, because that can be really comes down to, my division was way harder than yours. We had to play the other conference division. I think when it gets to like more than 4 wins, like, did they talk about the possibility of you have to be 3 wins better than the team you're playing in round 1 to have the home game?
Yeah, that was one, was like, do we have a marker where it's like, if there's a 3-game gap or a 2-game gap, then that's a stipulation in there.
Do you like that?
It just feels like too arbitrary for me. I don't know. I mean, there was another one where it was like, you have to be plus 500. If you win your division, you have to be plus.
I've been saying that for 20 years.
You have to be plus 500 to get the automatic seed. Otherwise, you're in the pool with the wild.
So you have to be 9-8 or
better,
8-7-2 or whatever it is. You have to have some sort of over 500 record.
Right. So they discussed that, which that makes some sense to me too. I think, when you're in a league that only plays 17 or 18 games and you're not playing everybody, it's just the records aren't the same. The records don't mean the same thing. And so I don't know if there's really a simple way to take care of it.
Yeah, if you go through the previous seasons, so in 2022, Tampa was 8-9, hosting the 12-5 Cowboys in round one. That's where it gets stupid.
And they beat them, right?
And by the way, they won. Right?
Yeah. Well, the Seahawks. You remember the Seahawks in the Beastquake game, the Marshawn game.
That's the famous one.
Right. So they beat the Saints, and I think if I remember right, the Saints were like 11-5 that year. It was like Breeze in the prime of his career, and they had to go all the way to Seattle.
They were like, So if it's 17 game season and it's 3 wins higher than the other team, I kind of like that. Because then if you're trying to make stakes for week 18, I think that's one way to potentially do it. I don't know if it solves every problem, but I thought the fact that the Rams, that you made the key point earlier, the Vikings are in this absolute war.
Right.
And then they have to go play the Rams the next week, who have just, been on vacation basically for a week.
And coming off the wildfire thing, and they're playing, and the game was weird in Arizona. Like the Vikings were dealing with all of these strange circumstances.
Yeah, right.
And it was like, but I think that's what scares the league is like, if that really worked, that means more teams are going to consider it next year. Like
especially in 18 games, you could do it for the last 2 games of the season.
But even this coming year, don't you think some teams are going to look at what the Rams did and say like, we need to consider that if we're locked into a playoff spot and we're just playing for, a single spot in the seeding.
Yeah.
Like maybe we are better off sitting all of our guys. And if you watch that game, you go back and watch that game, the Rams look like they were shot out of a cannon. Like and the Vikings looked like they were dead legged. So I think, that's what scares the league about it. And I think it's something that's going to be part of like the big picture discussion going forward.
Can you explain to everybody in 40 seconds why we're going to 18 games? Because you know the answer.
Yeah, it's because of money. I don't need 40 seconds to explain that.
But why would the players agree to it?
Because it's eventually going to be shoved down their throat. And like, I think for the players, it's as much about like, how do we get as much as we can for it? And I would say like my argument, if I were the union, what I would want is you need to get me to free agency quicker. Like you need to, instead of it being 4 years on rookie contracts, you need to have it be 3 years. Because if you think about it, like the difference between 16 and 18 games, right? That's 8 more games that you've got to make it through to get to free agency over 4 years, right?
Plus playoffs.
And you're talking about the most violent game, right? Like, so that's a real thing that, if I'm looking at it, I'm a player, I'm like, you got to get me to free agency quicker. The problem is, in the NFL is that the union is controlled by the older players who, is that going to be a priority for them to get a 22, 23-year-old to free agency faster? Generally, historically, it hasn't been the priority for them. But I think that that's what you would, if I'm the union, like I think that would be one of the first things I would ask for is you have to get more of my players to free agency faster. And maybe even like you look at franchise tags and those sorts of things. Is there a way we can loosen the reins on those as well?
So the older players wouldn't want that to happen because they're competing with those people in free agency. And then you have a league that 80% of the people, their careers are 3 years or less, 4 years or less.
It's the dichotomy of the league. It's
so they can't go on strike because you just lose the season and I've lost my earning power for one of the 4 years, basically.
Right. That's exactly it. Like that's a dichotomy of it is like the rank and file in the NFL is making less than $1 million a year and like is probably going to be out of the league within a couple of years. So they've got to take every dime they can get while they can get it. And yet the guys who are controlling the negotiation are the 1% of the 1%.
All right, we're wrapping up. So apologies to Jim Irsay and Trey Hendrickson's contract, but you do have to give me 25 seconds on Drake May, who's really the only thing I have going for me now, unless the Red Sox call up Roman Anthony.
I would say the best thing I could say is like the new staff's gotten in there. There was a lot of things broken last year. Josh's offense is pretty complex. He has worked on kind of simplifying some things. He studied the college game a bunch last year to try to make it a little more user-friendly. But the best thing I can tell you, the most encouraging thing I can tell you is that they have not needed to like game the offense up to make it work for Drake May. He has looked like a professional quarterback in the meeting room and on the practice field at this point.
And they got him a left tackle who's already sworn to protect him with his life. Game of Thrones style, like that lady. What was her, Brianna or whatever her name was?
I can't remember who it was. There was somebody who tried
tall
to
blonde lady.
There was somebody who tried to top it later in the draft too, who said that they were going to lay their life down for the franchise. I don't know if that's going to become a trend now. Like, who can go more Braveheart on like the?
I loved it. I've consumed all the Will Campbell content, and I'm here for him. I love how all he wants to do is protect Drake May. That's his job in life.
If you Google it, there's some really good like LSU weight room content that you'd really like.
Oh, like I haven't watched it. Come on.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm in. I don't care that his arms are an inch short. I'm all in on Will Campbell. All right. So you can read Albert on SI Listeners Podcast as well. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
This episode is brought to you by Uber Eats. Summer's almost here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get chicken parmesan delivered. I love chicken parmesan. A cabana, that's a no. But a banana, that's a yes. A nice tan, sorry, nope. But a box fan, happily, yes. A day of sunshine, no. A box of fine wines, yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. You're listening and watching the Bill Simmons podcast presented by FanDuel, our friends, America's #1 sportsbook, and they've made it easier than ever to get in on the action during an NBA playoff game, even after tip-off. Just look for the live SGP tab on the FanDuel Sportsbook app and build your own bet slip. Then sit back, relax, track the outcome of your parlay right in the app. And if you don't already have it, download the FanDuel app today to make every moment more. The Ringer is committed to responsible gaming. Please visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available and listen to the episode for additional details. It must be 21 plus and present in select states. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com.